What's going on, guys? Mike Stoker here. I want to get into where I'm at right now with the Atlas Gunworks Artemis 40 cal. I'm going to do a 10,000 round overview video, but since I had the gun apart, I think it's a good time to go over the inspection process I do at this interval of round count and kind of show you guys a little bit more about the Atlas Gunworks pistol.
In the first place, lying in the street. What's peace? Peace is when you leave it in the past, let it heal like a cast. When enough time passes and you blast, kind of like John Wick bars, like a convict runner. You don't want to start. Coming with the hot shit, all they do is talk. You can never stop it.
So right now, I'm approaching 10,000 rounds. This gun has just gone through the ultrasonic cleaner, the ultrasonic cleaning system. It's a Lyman 2500 milliliter. I'll put a link below if you guys want to check that out. It holds pretty much everything. I can fit a grip and a frame in there easily, slide, and most of the parts. So 2 cleans with that gets it done. But I want to kind of go over a little bit of when at 10,000 rounds, or what at 10,000 rounds I'm really looking at and what I want to inspect. Right now, I'm running just this one gun. I have a Nemesis. That's kind of the backup to this gun. I have another one of these being built, but I expect it to be a couple more months before I get it. So all the work is actually going into this one Artemis right now. So there's common things that should be inspected frequently, and we'll talk about those, and on intervals of 1,000 rounds or every time you clean, however often you clean your gun. There's things that should be inspected at 5,000, 10,000, basically 5,000 round intervals, and that's really what I want to focus on today. As far as the maintenance and the cleaning of the gun, just kind of preference it. I'm a little bit of a clean freak, so every time I shoot any gun, I clean it. Now, by cleaning it, I don't mean put it to this state. Typically, it's me just removing the slide, taking the spring, taking the barrel, cleaning the slide, cleaning any debris I can get to, wiping it down, re-oiling it. I'm not actually taking the grip and frame and internals apart. So that's typically every 300 rounds it gets that style of cleaning. And within those cleanings, there's things that I look at as well. But the big time cleaning of putting it to this typically happens at 5,000 rounds and then at 10,000 rounds. Right now for me, I've been shooting so much and aggressively, I let it almost slide to 10,000, so we're coming close to 10,000. Today's practice session will put me at 10,000 rounds on this platform. So I'm going to kind of go left to right over the parts and talk about the uniqueness of Atlas within each part and design, but also I want to expose or talk about what I'm looking at for wear, early signs, preventative maintenance. The goal with any gun, no matter who builds it, who makes it, if it's a $500 gun or $5,000 gun, is to keep the guns running. They are a mechanical tool and things fail. The great thing about getting a quality tool like Atlas Gunworks, it's typically not the built parts that are going to fail. It's springs that are going to be worn out, small little parts that are easily replaceable, but that can cost you a lot in a match. A simple recoil spring can really hurt you in a match. Little failures like that, extractors, ejectors, small stuff like that, wearable parts are what we're really trying to nip in the butt. I have Atlas pistols well over 80,000 rounds. I'm seeing them up to 150,000 rounds with the main baseline parts, but the maintenance of the wear parts. So I want to talk about the Alpha Grip. I hope you guys can bear with me with my messy shop bench. I hope the audio is good. This is kind of just on a whim based on an Instagram poll. The nice thing and the reason that I use the Ultrasonic is it strips all the oils out of the metal. So it gets it down to the bare so I can see actually how the finish looks, and it exposes any uneven wear marks or things that I need to watch out for. So this is the Alpha Grip. The nice thing about the grip, it's about as small as you can make a grip from front to back. So smaller hands, it's great. But the big versatility, the angle's slightly changed, but the biggest versatility is actually the panel systems. So there's a variety of panels that can be dropped in, and they literally just slide up under and lock in. And then the mag well, so they slide under there, lock in there, and the mag well retains them. And there's a variety of mag wells that you can get. So I started out, if you watch the previous videos, I started out with I had a tactical mag well on the gun, and I had the flat panels. I shoot single stack, so I thought the thinner would be better for me, but I quickly went away from the flat panels and tried the larger hand swell. There's also a step panel. I don't use that one just due to how I grip the gun with my left hand. It hits in a weird spot, but 99% of shooters I watch how their angle on the gun, that large hand really locks in the palm, and that's a beautiful thing. So for me, it just wasn't as comfortable, so I went with these, and that's what works. But that's the great thing about it, is you can really switch the panels out. This is an IPSC legal magwell, so I will be popping and changing magwell when I'm shooting IPSC this year, IPSC. So that's one of the main benefits is the panels. Also, their texture, it's extremely aggressive. This is stainless steel magwell. So I'll look it over, I inspect it, make sure there's no uneven wear, any new wear marks, no burring building up, nothing obnoxious happening anywhere within the gun. One of the other things Atlas did is right here they put a small hole inside the Atlas flame, and what that allows is for your Allen key to go in to do your over travel adjustment on your trigger, on the X-line trigger. So trigger adjustments, you can just slide the key in and adjust it real quick and easy. So that's the Atlas Gunworks Alpha grip. It looks good. Let's go into the frame, also made by Atlas. This gray is because of the coating or the oils being stripped. If I had oil on my hand and did that, you'll see how it blackens up. So with DLC coating, it's one of the most durable coatings, and I'll actually, when I assemble this gun, I'll get a little oil on a rag and I'll wipe the entire gun before I reassemble it. But right now I want it bare. That way I can really inspect it. So I'm looking back in here, I'm looking where all the important internal parts, the sear, the hammer, the disconnect and everything go, to inspect for any burring. I've had, not from an Atlas and another gun, a disconnect build a burr at the base and actually pin the disconnect, causing the gun to hammer follow. So I'm really looking out for that. I'm looking through all the pinholes, make sure nothing's wallered out or walking around, and just pretty much the finish of the gun. The nice thing, if you do this often, if something's wearing, it'll take it to bare metal and you'll be able to catch your eye and notice. You're gonna have normal rub basic marks, but those aren't. I'm looking for burring, I'm looking for excessive gouging. I'm checking the rails for the same thing, any unevenness in the rails, all the way up through the dust covering throughout. So it's really just a good detailed look over, nothing's popping out. One of the big ones I'm going to look at that could cost a lot in a match is the ejector. So I've broken a shitload of ejectors over the years and I've learned my lesson with them. So any abnormality within that, and the only way you know what it's supposed to look like is if you look like at it from the beginning. So when I get a gun, and this is just me because I'm weird, but I photograph my guns. I'll take them apart and I'll photograph so I know what they should appear to look like. Tuning an ejector, they're all going to look a little bit different. Every builder tunes them and angles them and does things their own way. So I now know from the years of it with Atlas, I know what this should look like. And if anything's changing, it'll catch my eye. Typically, if I ever break an ejector, it's because I'm slamming mags like an animal and just way too aggressively. That hasn't happened in quite a long time. So that's the frame. It's tack rail on there. Not really using the tack rail, but that's the frame. Steel framed. Barrel. So within the barrel, it's a KKM barrel. We got the sight block on it. I like a green fiber, so I'm going to inspect my sight, make sure my fiber doesn't need to be replaced. We're looking, it's very well centered. I'll usually get my micrometer and I'll measure it on my center point. I want to check my alignment as well, and I'll pull my alignment through to make sure my block isn't coming loose, make sure nothing's twisting. From there, I'm going to look for any uneven wear, whether it's on the barrel or on the block. But the most important thing that I'm checking are my lugs and the barrel pin. I don't want any excessive lateral movement. Being that I feel this often, I know what it came with, I know what it should feel like. I need everything to be free. I don't want the pin to be walking, the pin to be loose, so I'm going to inspect that as well. I use a microscope with a light. I'll actually go in there and I'll look at the lands and the grooves, the rifling of the barrel, inspect the breech, inspect the chamber, and kind of really looking for any abnormalities. Anything with this, if you nip it in the butt or you catch something, it's preventative maintenance. But like I said, these I've got one Titan with 80,000 on the same barrel, and it still holds a 1-inch group. So that's great. So that's things I'm looking there. Magwell I don't care about. Well, I do, but it's not really an inspection-based thing. We'll talk about the slide. So aside from what was aforementioned of uneven wear and stuff, that's kind of the same thing, but I'm really paying attention to the lugs, just like with the barrel, so we know where our lockup is, that nothing is unbalanced, or I don't want any of these edges to be rolling over on lockup. We don't want the gun unlocking too early. We don't want any uneven wear within those lugs. Inspecting the rails also, looking in there. Now you are going to get, I mean, those suckers should be shiny in there because they're polished smooth, so that's why these guns are like glass. Same thing right here, polished smooth. It's like glass. Am I gaining any wear on here? Anything rubbing, anything abnormal on there? I'm looking at that. Same thing up front in the tunnel. I'm looking through there, making sure, I don't know what you'd call that face there, but that's one spot I look at. If it's a squared edge, I hope it's staying a squared edge, like these are squared edge. If they're starting to round out, that's going to be slop in the gun, right? So sights, same thing. I'll go over the sights, make sure it's tight, everything's locked down, everything's smooth. I'll look down for the extractor, make sure there's no burring or anything being built up there. Checking on the breech face and also from the back, and also the firing pin tunnel. There's no obstruction in there. And I'll typically use a light and that microscopic light to look through there to make sure that's all good. So that's the slide. Pretty simple. The reality is we're just looking for anything preventative that could become a problem. Beaver tail, not much to look at there. We're just going through wear, same concept. These suckers fit tight. First time I took this gun apart, I thought I was gonna have to beat this back in. It's so flippin' tight. That's that. Slide stop, same thing. Disconnected, but I don't want any gouging or galling or anything going on there, and this looks really good. The cool thing is every single one of these parts, I know you guys aren't gonna see it, is serial number match this. I mean, all the way down to the damn back plate on this gun. Everything is hand fit and matched for this gun, and that's Atlas Gunworks quality. That's what you're getting. So that's what you're paying for. Back plate, pretty simple too. No burring building up. A lot of these little parts are just quick glance stuff. A lot of them you're going to see frequently because you're tearing the gun down more often. So I'll kind of go through and look at the parts. The key main major stuff I'm going to spend more time on. A lot of the small parts we're just checking for excessive wear, new wear, unusual wear, or burring on the gun. But it's about doing it frequently so you know what things are going to look like. Coatings over time are going to rub, they are going to wear. That's how it happens. They're moving parts, metal on metal. If you're not oiling your gun right, you're not taking care of it right, that's going to happen. It doesn't mean it's about to break. What I really want to see and make sure there's no sharp edges, there's no gouging, there's no any pieces of metal that are hanging out that are causing any issues. Now, I'll talk about some of the other parts that are, well, we'll go through the hammer. Checking the pin, so I'll do like this. I want to check laterally, make sure that pin's not walking. I want to see the edge, and this also is something that I put on a microscope. Okay, so I'm checking how this hooks up. So I'll be checking both edges, make sure that there is no burring, no rounding, nothing new, that everything's smooth. And this for me, I'm looking at with a microscope. This is vital for performance pistol shooting, is how well your hammer hooks and how well just basically your engagement is on there. So we're really looking at that to make sure the fit is still staying the same. Same thing with the disconnect. I don't want any burring. I want this to be like polished, buttery smooth, so it can freely flow up and down in the disconnect channel. Okay, so those are vital parts to check. Know what you're looking at. I didn't take the spring out of the mag release, mag catch, however you want to call it. I just put a new spring in it. Right now, I was having issues when I gripped the gun because of how far forward my support hand goes that I drop magazines. So I actually have the heavy spring in this, what's it called? mag release spring, Wolf, high cap, heavy. Basically there's light, standard, medium, and then heavy. So I put the heaviest spring in there to prevent me from dropping magazines. I've kept same spring. They take a while to wear out. Depends how many reloads you're doing. In single stack, they wear out a lot quicker because I reload a lot more. But at this interval, that spring should be fine. The extractor. So this is another part that can fail, that has failed in many guns. That can be a pain in the butt. You always need spare parts. So if you look in my spare parts, I have a spare rear sight, front sight, fiber, springs, safeties, extractor, a tuned ejector, the backup pins. I have enough spare parts to where I can, any of the breakable parts that are common within 2011s, 1911s to break, I have on hand, and the tools to change them out. And one of the more common is your extractor. So I'm really looking at the head of the extractor, but also the lip where it's hooking up. For me, every time I take my slide off, like to wipe my gun down, I do a quick extractor. It's such a simple thing, a quick extractor tension test. Maybe I'll do a video on that later. Basically with an empty casing set in the slide here, and a shake test to make sure that this is actually grabbing the extractor, or grabbing the rim of the case and holding it in place. So if I notice this is being round and pulled out, then it might be time to replace it. It's such a simple, cheap, easy part that if there's any chance of it going wrong, this is a bad thing to fail on a stage. And then, so I'm inspecting that, and then when I put it back together, I'll inspect the extractor tension. It's easy to adjust the tension and tune your extractor tension, especially as you're putting it. You got to pull the back plate off to tune it, so you got to be able to remove it. So you might as well tune it and check it while you're assembling or disassembling the gun. I don't get too wild about the mainspring. I don't know. I haven't had any issues with mainspring housing. I obviously look for any abnormality, but to remove the spring and pull the spring out and weigh and scale the spring, maybe that's something I need to be doing. But like I said, on guns that I have an insane amount on, I have the same spring and they function just fine. So all this testing is because of, over the years, having springs go and stuff, that it's caused an issue that now I'm more preventative. But this one hasn't been one for me. So I guess I kind of leave it. I leave it alone. Trigger bow, trigger shoe, not much to look at there. I want to keep it clean, make sure it's nice, polished, smooth, sliding freely. You know, X-Line Vary, you got a couple adjustments for over travel. You got the tab adjustments for forward travel. These triggers you can really dial in, so pretty sweet. Same here. I have seen one of these break. I haven't had one break on me, so I'm just looking it over, checking for crazy wear, making sure nothing's cracked, nothing damaged, none of the lips are pulling up, everything's still square and aligned, and that this is still engaging. I'm not going to punch that pin out. It works. This is a simple part. I have a backup if this were to go. I'll throw a new one in. So it's really like how much attention you want to put to stuff. Firing pin. Firing pin, one of the checks I'll do is I'll actually drop it into the gun and make sure that it is hitting center, that the firing pin is centered on the firing pin hole, that the firing pin's not broke. You'll notice where your strikes are in your primer. If they're like way up and to the right, way off to the left, you probably have a bent firing pin, or someone didn't build your gun right and your tunnel's crooked. I'm checking the tip of the firing pin, make sure it looks good. It's always good to have spare parts, so I have spare firing pin and I'll pull that out and I'll inspect them side by side to make sure they're good. Let's get into some of the springs. So that's kind of the gist of like majority of the parts. I'm looking for anything uneven wear, common sense obviously, but a lot of people don't do it. They're just throwing, most people aren't taking their gun down to this point, but that's how we get these to run well over 100,000 on this setup, is you're just common maintenance. It's a damn shame to spend $6,000 on anything if you are uneducated, not willing to learn how to keep your gun running, how to keep your gun clean. And the simple thing with like with Atlas, with this gun, it's like, just keep it clean, keep it lubed, and it'll do its job. You know, what I'm doing now, it can be considered excessive, but I'm passionate about it and I enjoy doing it. And for how much time and money I put into the sport, it makes sense for me to do that. Atlas has services where you can send your gun back to them fully assembled. Hopefully you're nice and you clean it before you send it, but they will do this, but way more detailed. They'll go through the entire gun from top to bottom. It's a service thing. They'll top to bottom, go through the entire gun, fix, replace, tune, adjust anything that's damaged, and send it back. And it's an amazing price. So a lot of people just do that once a year in the off season. But for the rate I shoot, it would happen multiple times. So every 5,000 to 10,000, I'm doing this. Spring testing. So cool thing to buy, I believe this is still on Atlas's website, is a spring test gauge. I'll show you guys how this works. So basically I'm going to take the spring, put the base towards the base of the bolt, run it up, and we put this nut back on. I hope you guys are able to see all this. This spring gauge, I can also use it. So any spring, aside from real small springs, but like on the firing pin, same thing. If I replace the recoil spring, also I'm replacing the firing pin as well, because they come together in a pack, so why wouldn't I do that? So it's actually like a fish scale gauge. Okay, so it's power on. Usually I'll grab this in a vise just to hold it simple so it's consistent, but for this sake of simplicity, there's a mark here. Hold on, let me zero. There's a mark on the scale, so I'm going to hold flat and I want to pull the bolt. Basically, as long as I'm consistent with it, I'm in ounces like a dummy. Let me switch my units. I need it to be in pounds. As long as I'm pulling to the same spot consistently every time, then I know. And this when I put this spring in, it was around 10 pounds. If I can hold still. Damn it. I'm shaking too much. Eventually it'll lock, but I'm bouncing between like 9.8 and 10.12. So that spring is good. I'm at 10 pounds. So any springs, I got packs and packs of springs, even if they're brand new from the factory, I'll open them up, I'll pull to my same spot on my scale, and I'll label the bag what the spring weight is. And then I mark them all. And then basically every 5,000, I'll put the spring on this scale and I'll pull the spring and weigh it, and I'll also, any spring I can gauge, I'll gauge it. And then from there, that gives me an understanding. One of my first majors is Area 1, and I hadn't changed a recoil spring, and I had like 15,000 on the gun, and it was freezing cold. I was using the wrong lube, and that gun pretty much went bolt action over a spring. Buddy had a 12-pound spring. I was running a 10 in the gun. It just wasn't enough to rack the slide or cycle the slide. He handed me 12, fixed the problem. I took that spring home, bought the scale, and that spring had worked its way down. It was right around 8 pounds, so it worked its way down. Spring length, also consideration of spring length, and make sure you're not binding. And that's when, when you're putting it back together, that you're not binding. And I look at those things, we could talk about those later when the gun's assembled, what I'm checking for. But that spring scale is affordable, and it's a game changer, because this is one of the maintenance parts that's going to be replaced the most. Same thing if you're running a shock buff. Your springs are typically the more replaced parts. Sear spring, so how I tune or how I adjust this is based on my trigger pull break weight. I typically run my guns about 1 pound 12 ounces across all my guns, and I tune them at that. Anytime you buy a new gun and it's breaking in, working in, you can find that at times it can slightly start to lighten up, and then it'll flatline and typically stay the same once it's broken. So if that is lower than what I want, which this one now is, this one is down to 1 pound 2 ounces. I'm going to adjust the far left spring, which is the Sear spring, to add a little bit more tension. Safeties, obviously disconnect doesn't matter. Spring in the center is going to affect the pressure on the trigger for the reset, and I like it very tactile, so I'll tune that to match. This one's actually perfect, so I'm going to leave it alone. So I'll add a little bit of a Sear spring pressure. There's plenty of videos Atlas puts out on where to hold this, how to bend it, and how to tune it. I'm not going to get into that with you guys. We all have our own ways of doing it. I have my way that works for me, but it's pretty much the way that Atlas says to do it. So springs, having a spare backup. I've seen Leafs bend, break, damage, whatever. So I have always a spare one of these that's already tuned and ready to be dropped into the gun. I want parts to where if I'm at a nationals, and this has happened to me, if I'm at a nationals and something fails, instead of sitting there fiddling with it and trying to figure it out, mostly I just grab my backup gun. But if you're not in that state, I want to literally be able to go to the safety table, pull out a part that's tuned to fit this gun and drop it in. Everything from back plates to safeties to Sears, hammer, all these small parts I have a separate set tuned to drop into this gun. This one I haven't had to use them on, but I have had springs go out at major matches. I've had issues with Sear springs, and I've had those parts and just pulled them and dropped them in. So self-diagnosis and understanding your gun is often the key. This is a sport where I don't want to say luck plays a factor, but if some small part just catastrophically randomly fails and that hurts your performance, the whole year worth of work that you put in, that's a damn shame. So by doing this, it's giving confidence in the system and assuring me that I've done everything that I've set the system up, I've inspected it, the gun's gonna run. I know it's gonna run, I'm not gonna have any issues. Now it's up to me to perform. So the gun's not an excuse. My shooting ability. Now, if TSA, Area 1 for me this year, TSA dropped my guns and completely knocked a front sight off of my primary gun, like completely off, and I messed with the sight into the match trying to keep it maintained center. That's out of control. That's why you have backup guns. That's why you have backup stuff. Something you can't control, but what you can control, I am a strong believer in, you absolutely need to control that. So that's a little bit of an overview of the Atlas Gunworks Artemis, the things that I inspect, my intervals of inspection. I wipe my guns down every time I shoot them. I deep clean them like in an ultrasonic every 5,000 rounds, and I do complete inspections. 10,000 rounds, I do this. At 50,000 rounds, the gun will go back to Atlas Gunworks, and they'll do their full on, way more in depth than I'm doing, and replace anything that needs to be replaced. On this season, that's probably going to hit in about 3 months, 4 months. I'll be at that point, but by then I'll have another gun. So this will become a backup practice gun, and that'll become a main match gun. So the rounds will be dispersed evenly, extending the longevity throughout the season. So thank you guys for checking this out. Tabletop review, typically not a fan of it, but it worked best for this scenario. So drop comments if you have any questions, concerns, or if there's anything different that I didn't do that you might do, put them in the comments below. Let me know. I'll also attach links to Atlas Gunworks in the comments below. If I can find the link to the scale test, I'll put that in the comments below or in the description if you're on YouTube. And then also the Lyman ultrasonic cleaner that I use, because that's one of the biggest questions I get. It's going to be in the comments below. All my tool bags, all my spare parts, cleaning kit, I use running gun apparel bags. I'll have a link for that as well. All the extras fit in there and snugly fit into my range bag. So thanks guys for joining me. I'm going to have another video coming out next on a different overview of the shooting of this gun and why I've changed certain things with the setup. So stay tuned for that. Have a great day.
All these other muggers full of indecision, and I murder with precision all over your television. I'm numero uno, number one, and you is just a subdivision. Never listen, we gon' leave them missing. That's the mission like ISIS. Ain't no sign of it over who the nicest. It's logic, it's obvious. Just